In terms of the gaps you see, the middle layer, in which there is nothing, not too much of evidence and not too much of tracking and then records found out. But as you have gone across multiple countries to navigate through the archives, what are the initial hints of evidence you would see that there was a middle layer which hasn't been talked about?
Yeah, this is the missing evidence that I couldn't find, and in fact there was no way I could find it, or if I did find it, I couldn't use it because I don't speak any Indian language. I certainly don't read it. It is most Indian troops were illiterate, but within each unit there were men who were literate, and they would write letters, and those letters would be sent back to their villages. And we know this because from the force in Egypt and in France, those letters were censored. And the censors, the British censors, who were mostly retired Indian officials, would transcribe the letters. And so they could see, they could gauge the morale, the feeling amongst Indian troops. And those letters are still in the National Archives in London, the transcriptions, and they were published. David Amissi did a whole book on them. The letters that were sent from Gallipoli, sadly, were not censored. So we don't know what the Indian letters from Gallipoli read. The letters were sent to villages in the Punjab and Nepal, possibly, and some of them may have survived. I say may because, as you know, as all Sikhs know, 1947 was a time of turmoil and destruction, and lots of those letters would have been lost as Sikh homes were burned and as possessions were piled into boxes and carried off for a new life. And what would a few letters matter, even if they'd survived? So it is possible that in Sikh homes, there are letters that were written on behalf of Sikh soldiers on Gallipoli and reached their villages and were read out to the family and then were passed around the village and became sort of public property because they would often mention their comrades' names. If the letters from France were any judge, they would not just write to their family about their experience, they would mention their comrades. So they were kind of communal property, but they weren't published. In Australia, for example, letters back home, first of all, were kept by the family. They were often then published in newspapers, so you can find a lot of them, and they're digitized now. And then they were often donated to libraries and archives, so you can easily find them. That's not the case in India. So it's possible that those letters exist. My friend and colleague Rana China in India has been looking for that sort of material for years, and he's probably found less than half a dozen sources. So if they are in family possession, they're very closely guarded. And it's such a shame and a paradox because lots of Sikhs want to know about their forebears' history and war. And those letters would give us insights into not just those men, but their friends and their units' experience. But finding them will have to be the job of an Indian, of a Sikh or Punjabi speaking researcher who can gain the trust of those families and encourage them to let that material become public. And then we might know a bit more about what went on in the trenches of Gallipoli among Indian soldiers.